So we've come to the end of learning about how different groups achieve differently. We've looked at gender, ethnicity and class. You need to now think about how we answer exam questions on that. So I want you to start thinking about the difference between a 10 and 20 mark question and what you need to remember about any question worth less than 10 marks. So in this session you're going to know some ways that you'll be asked a question, you'll be able to explain how these impact achievement, and you'll be able to evaluate using theoretical perspectives and think about how they comment on people's performance. So just a reminder about assessment objectives in the circ paragraphs. We know our AO1 is about knowledge and understanding. It is literally about what we know and how we present our understanding. So it needs to be really clear. It needs to have lots of keywords. Our AO2 is our application. This is how we apply our evidence to what we have said. So our key points that have come up in our AO1. And now we have evidence applied to that to show that it is sociological rather than just someone's opinion. Then the AO3 is the analysis and evaluation. Evaluation, we know, is weighing something up, looking at both sides, looking at pros and cons, and always using theoretical perspectives. The analysis, we're developing more and more, and you're getting better and better at it. It's making links between things. It's thinking about how one thing can impact another. So, for instance, how gender can impact achievement, but also how it can be other things too. So for your circ paragraph, you state the argument. That's your knowledge and understanding. You're saying what the issue is. And you're using key words, key concepts. You're showing that you understand them. You don't necessarily have to define them, but you need to show that you've used them in an appropriate way. You then need to explain what this means and analyse the links that might have to other aspects of society or social issue. And that's your analysis. Your explanation is still part of your knowledge and understanding, whereas your analysis is your AO3. Your reference is the evidence that you are providing to support the argument that you're making. This is your application. You're showing what sociologist research has said to support the point that you're making. And finally, we criticise. This is AO3, and we use theoretical concepts, and we also conclude at the end to be able to get the highest marks possible. So your task today is to choose one question from each slide and answer them full. Do them on a lined piece of paper so that we can use them next lesson. We can do some peer assessment and I can take them in and mark them too. So define the term. This is a 2-mark question. You need to say what it means and give an example. So you can either define the term ethnocentric curriculum or you can define the term hyperheterosexual female. The next type of question is a 2-mark question as well, and it asks you to use one example and explain. So you get 2 marks for a clearly explained example. So the example has to be appropriate and it has to be explained well. Or you get 1 mark for a partially explained example, so where you really haven't quite hit the nail on the head, but it is relevant. So use one example, explain how a pupil's sexual identity may impact their achievement. Or you can choose to use one example, explain how speaking in restrictive code may impact achievement. The next type of questions is your 6-mark question, and this is asking you to outline 3 ways. So you get 2 marks for each of 3 appropriate reasons clearly outlined. This is 3 different reasons. They can't be similar, otherwise you may lose marks. Or you get 1 mark for just an appropriate reason that's partially outlined. So you haven't really said what it is, but you've stated it. You do not need to write more than about a line or 2 for this, for each one. It's not a paragraph, it's not a discussion, it's simply stating those 3 ways and giving some depth to that. So you may outline 3 ways social policy has created more equality and achievement. Outline 3 ways the curriculum has changed to benefit girls. Outline 3 ways the formation of gender identity is influenced by the teacher. So choose one of those. The next type of question is your 10-mark question. So this is where you outline and explain. So this is going further than the previous one. You have to give some show some understanding, you have to show some analysis, and you have to show some evidence. So you need to show very good knowledge and understanding of two different ways that something may happen. So you need to choose relevant material. They both need to be different ways, but you also now need to explain them fully. You need to use appropriate analysis so that you can look at the significance or the impact of a change or an issue within the education system. So in these cases, it will be how social groupings or social issues can affect achievement. So you may outline and explain two ways external factors are responsible for the underachievement of working class pupils, or you may outline and explain two ways that internal factors are responsible for the underachievement of girls. Apologies for the typos there. But remember, we're not evaluating. We don't need to look at the pros and cons, the strengths and weaknesses, or strengths and limitations. We can apply theory if you want to show your skills of application and the evidence, but you don't necessarily need to be able to get full marks in this. You definitely don't need to conclude. The final question that you can get asked is a 20-mark question. This is looking at both sides of the argument. We're evaluating now. We need to evaluate sociological explanations of an issue that they give. So you need to explain how sociologists have explored or given reasons for the differences in achievement of different social groups. So you're looking at how useful their research is, what theorists might say about it. We're looking at if it is just one social aspect or if it's other social aspects too. We're thinking about how some research it conflicts or confirms what others have said. And we need to think about how that can impact people. So what might happen as a result? So you need sound, conceptually detailed knowledge of a range of relevant material. It needs to be accurate, it needs to have detail, it needs to be in depth, it needs to have keywords and concepts, and it needs to be appropriate for the question. So we're not going off on tangents. It needs to be good, sophisticated understanding of the question and presented material, so that when you apply your examples, they are appropriate. They do respond directly to the question. And then they need to be good. They can't just be too generic. They need to be really appropriate, as the next point says. And it needs to be applied with sensitivity to the question. So you're referring back to the question all the time. You're saying how what you're saying or what you're stating answers the question. Your analysis and evaluation will be explicit and relevant. It will be really clear that you're analysing or evaluating through the words that you're using. So we know that evaluation was however, therefore. Analysis comes into it because this happens for a reason, and other things. So whenever I write why next to your question, you're explaining why. Evaluation may be developed, for example, through debate between different perspectives. This means that you need to look at two sides of an argument. It needs to look at conflicting views from functionalism, Marxism, feminism and interactionism. You must look at both sides of the story. Analysis needs to have clear explanation. This shows how it's relevant and how it's accurate, and appropriate conclusions will be drawn. You can't get top marks if you don't conclude this exam question. The differences in achievement between social groups is what I want you to focus on. So I want you to evaluate sociological explanations of the differences in achievement between social groups. So in essence, what have the sociologists said in explaining why different social groups achieve differently? Remember, we need to look at gender, class and ethnicity. And that's all that I want you to do for Thursday's lesson. Please bring everything with you to your lesson on Monday, and we'll be doing some peer assessment, and I'll be taking your work into mark. Remember to be thinking about the things you'd like me to highlight revision on, and I can focus our next couple of lessons on preparing you for your mock, which will happen in the last week of this half term.